Hello guys, Braxcast time once again. This is the 52nd episode of the Braxcast, and this isn't going to be a topical or news-related Braxcast, so if you're looking for the latest Rippaverse news, check out the Twitter account, social media, always keeping you guys updated. But this week and the next week is going to be tier list, so we're going to start with all of the Rippaverse heroes, or basically most of them. Going to go through all of them. I've got their character pictures down here, a nice little tier list maker or tier maker, and we're going to go through all of them. I'm going to rank them from S tier to D tier based on nothing more than my subjective opinion. So if you're into that, stay tuned. If not, then we are welcome to come back when I talk about news related stuff for the Rippaverse. But we are going to get right into this tier list. We're going to start with Altona Daniels. So of course Altona Daniels is the sister to Isom, and I think she's a pretty good character. She doesn't have any special powers or anything like that, so she's more or less like a support character. That was her role in Yaira #1. So I'm going to put her in B tier. She's got a good relationship with her daughter. She's, Vasi Silman. We're going to be doing at some point throughout this, but I think she's a good character. She's got a lot of possibility, but since she's not a next up, then she just has her intellect and her connections at Projexus. I'll say she's solidly in the B tier. Next, we're going for Sydney Bloodroof. Now, Sydney Bloodroof was introduced in Isom #2. Her first book, Bloodroof #1, should be fulfilling this month, that being the month of February. So that's something I haven't read quite yet, since I haven't gotten it yet at the time of recording this, but very excited to get into Bloodroof's character. She's also a character that a lot of people are very interested in. So I'm going to put her in A tier, because she's got the cool blood power, she's got a lot of mysticism surrounding her origins, and so I think she's a really cool character. She's definitely got a lot in terms of staying power in the Rippaverse, considering she's going to have an ongoing series. And like I said, like I've said plenty of times when I've talked about news, new Braxcast, where the news cycle for the Rippaverse has been focused on her. We know with her collection launching in October, and then news coming out, after in those following weeks, that she's a very interesting character, and she's going to give us a lot of insight into aspects of the Rippaverse that we haven't quite just yet. So she's solidly in the A tier. Now we're going off to my favorite character, that is Jeremiah Braxwell, the Visor Chad, of course, introduced in Isom #1, had a pretty important role in Alpha Core #1, and he also made a very slight cameo in Horseman as well. He is, of course, going in S tier. He is our silent savior. He is the glue that holds the Alpha Core together, not including Brian Solari, but he's an absolute beast of a character. He's so cool. Absolutely love everything about Braxwell. He defaults into the S tier. Anybody who disagrees is welcome to fight me on that one, but they are wrong. Next, we are going for Brian Solari. Now, when I interviewed Chuck Dixon, it was probably one of the best things I ever did on Braxcast, if not the best thing. But he said his favorite character was Brian Solari, and I could definitely see why. He's got a lot of that Superman ethos, but he still feels like he's his own character. He definitely has flaws and mistakes that he made. Of course, all of Alpha Core appeared in Isom #1. That was their introduction. That was part of what Isom #1 was building, was this introduction of the Alpha Core. It was a very couple of pages in Isom #1. Of course, Alpha Core #1 really expanded upon their story and gave us a really interesting look into all three of the characters, especially Brian Solari. So I'm going to put him, I should say, into A tier. Going to put him above Bloodroof. I think he's top of the A tier, but only Braxwell can have that illustrious S tier, because no one's better than Braxwell, in my humble opinion. Next, we are going into Cedric Gaucho. So Cedric Gaucho is a character that we do not know that much about. hasn't made too many appearances. He made a very slight appearance in the end of Item number 1, had a little bit of an appearance in the end of Item number 2. That conversation between Cedric and Isom, if you guys remember, is where Isom talks about what got him to retire, that being his encounter with Shodron. So I think he's going to be in B tier, a little bit ahead of Altona because he's going to have this role with the SSWL, and of course having this, I forget the guy's name, if it was Virgil in Invincible, but anyway, the guy who did all of the costume designs for Omni-Man and Invincible, Mark Grayson. I think he's going to settle into having a role like that. It's going to be very interesting ongoing in the Rippaverse, and his little cameo in Item number 1 did give the reader a bit of insight into just how much more of a universe that Eric was intending with Item number 1. That Item number 1 did not exist in a vacuum. It was intended to be part of this larger superhero comic book universe narrative, and I think they did a pretty good job of doing that. Of course, we only got his name, Cedric Gaucho, from the concept art book, with when Item number 1 was the only book that was under the Rippaverse, and I believe that's where we have his name, because I don't think it's really mentioned in Item number 2. But anyway, we are going on to the next hero, and that is Kato Gooding. Of course, Gooding, another character introduced in Item number 2. Fans really loved him. He got his own book in the spring of last year, launching at the last day of spring, fulfilling at the end of July, was Gooding the Polymath, the true origin story for Gooding. Absolutely love that story. It was a bit on the lighter side, but Mike Barron gave us a really nice plot. Will Conrad's art was absolutely impeccable for the vast majority of it. There was some stuff in some of the backgrounds that people picked at, but everything else in terms of how, the figures are rendered, the coloring, the inking, it all looked absolutely fantastic. And Mike Barron told a pretty good, albeit condensed story in Gooding the Polymath, giving us his origin story. And he's a very interesting character. So I'm going to put him in A tier, slightly below Bloodroof, because he does not have the X-Up powers. He's got his gadgets and his genius level intellect, as if you read on the Marvel wikis, that's a power that they'll give to Peter Parker and Iron Man, and I think Gooding definitely has that genius level intellect, and that allows him to build all the gadgets. And he's a bit trained, but he's much more of a brains than brawn type of character. I'm definitely all for that. So we are heading into the big man himself, Isom Avery Silman. Of course, his book is what launched the Rippaverse. So we've got Isom 1 and Isom 2. Those were the two books that really established the Rippaverse, not only in terms of narrative, but in terms of establishing the Rippaverse as a company. Though between the campaigns of those two books, it made about, I think, $6 million, something like that. And of course, those are just the campaign numbers. Those books have sold plenty of copies in between and after their campaigns. So Isom has definitely built the Rippaverse. He's made it as notorious as it has been, and he's a pretty interesting character. So I think he's going to go, like I said, in the A tier. He's an interesting character. He's got a lot of, he's got some mysterious, he's got some mystery about his powers, mostly how he got into being super powered and how he honed his body into having the powers that he has. But we know he's super durable, he's super strong, and he's super agile. But we don't know specifically more than that, especially how he was able to train himself into having powers, because that's really what he states. So he's a very interesting character. Of course, we've got a lot more to find out about him. Isom number 3 is supposed to give us this really nice, juicy conclusion to all the plot points that were established in the first two parts of the ill-advised arc. So really excited to see that. Really excited to see how Isom's story develops, not only in his own book, but how it relates to the Rippaverse in general. So next we are going on to Horseman. So Horseman is Hector Lee Cabrello. He was announced at Rubicon will happen at some point if it keeps going the way things are going. But MegaCon 2024 is when Horseman Welcome to Flores Park was announced. And that was the introductory graphic novel done by Chuck Dixon and Joe Bennett, same team that did Alpha Core. They did a fantastic job on that book, and so much so that the book made $800,000 and now has an ongoing series. Horseman #1 should be coming out sometime this year, being 2025, and I absolutely loved his introductory graphic novel. It's a 96-pager, a really good book. Absolutely loved that one. I definitely think he slots in slightly above Gooding. He's a bit more of an interesting character. Of course, he's definitely more bronze than brain, being a former Army Ranger, and you especially read his book. He does make some fumbles that someone like Gooding would not have made because he can think things through. But he just charges in, and he's got a very strong moral code. He's got the family, so he's a classic vigilante character. I absolutely love Horseman. Can't wait to see how he develops now that we know he has his own ongoing series. So next we are going for Ingrid Valdez. So Ingrid Valdez is the most recent member of the free members of the Alpha Corps that were introduced to us in ISM #1. Of course, this is spoilers for Yaira #1, but Stefania becomes the 4th member of the Alpha Corps after she gets the same powers that Yaira does from a, I guess, supernatural interstellar event is probably the best way to describe that. So I think Ingrid Valdez, the fact that, she can't fly, she can't, she's got the investigative ability, she's got the whips. I'm going to place her in between, in the A tier, in between Gooding and Horseman, because I think she fits in pretty well there. So we are now, especially since she's part of a team of the Alpha Corps, I think that gives her a bit more of an advantage over Gooding. And I also, of course, love the fact that she has, I think, a history as a powerlifter. Of course, she's a very confident, self-assured woman. Absolutely love that. And of course, those whips, absolutely love the whip powers that she has. Even though that she can't fly, her agility, the whip powers, the detective abilities that she has, I think more than makes up for it. It makes her a very worthy addition to the Alpha Corps. So now we are going to Larry Shungite. Now, Larry Shungite is part of the SSWL. That's the Southern Style Wrestling League. Introduced first in ISM #1, the idea of the SSWL. Cedric Gaucho did work for them before making hero suits. And then in ISM #2, we have the introduction of Larry Shungite. And of course, it's just a broadcast that Lincoln Eusebio is watching before he goes on and does some other stuff in that story. So we don't know much. Basically, you don't know anything about Larry other than the fact that he is a wrestler. So I'm going to place him in C tier. We don't know a lot about him. He seems like he's a decently interesting character. I'm going to consider him one of the good guys. He could be a bit more villainous, but for now he's in this heroes tier list, as in guys that aren't explicitly evil, and he's staying there, but he's solidly in the C tier. So now we're going to Lincoln Eusebio, who I mentioned before, and he's like again, we know he's the CEO of Projexis. I'm going to place him at the top of B tier because it does, if I can, yep, there we go. We'll place him at the top of B tier because he's got some interesting abilities. He walks through a metal detector, it goes off, and he's like, did you have a gun on you? It's like, what gun? So we know he's got something about him that sets off metal detectors. He was able to survive a car crash in ISM #2. He's very assertive. He was really laying it down with Darren Fontano in the introduction or the first pages of ISM #2. So I would say he's top of B tier, but it's not enough for me to put him in A tier, unfortunately. And honestly, I'm going to feel the same way about Mick Davies. So Mick Davies is going to be right behind Lincoln. And Mick Davies is the sergeant of the Flores Park Police Department. He's introduced in ISM #1 at the very beginning, where he's made aware that Yaira is back in the city, right? That's a slightly interesting thing. He's got a little bit of a cameo, I believe, in Horseman and Alpha Corps #1, although his role in both of those books is pretty muted in comparison to the main character. So he's definitely a supporting character for now. I'm sure he's going to become more, especially, I think, Isom 3 and beyond, he's going to be much more of a relevant character in the later, or as the Rippaverse develops. But for now, solidly in the B tier. Now we've got Salvage. So Salvage PI was the first introduced in the first Rippazine. The first short story of the Rippazine was his, Salvage PI. That was written by Eric July, art done by Bart Sears. Absolutely fantastic book. I think just about everybody loved it. People loved it so much that we are getting a full graphic novel. That's Salvage PI Lethal Force, if I'm getting the subtitle correct. And that should be coming out sometime this year. So absolutely excited to see that one. And I think I'm going to put him just above, just above Gooding right there, because he's just got this cool style to him. He's definitely, he has the LF certification. That's only one of 3 people having that LF certification. So we'll see where that takes him. Of course, seeing that full graphic novel experience for Salvage is going to be really cool. And I'm going to have a much more solidified opinion of Salvage once I read Salvage Lethal Force. But now we're moving to Sanford Willard. So Sanford Willard is the lead ranch hand at Silman Ranch. So he's a friend and confidant of Isom, or Avery Silman, and his kidnapping by the Devlings in Isom number 2 is a pretty big plot point, and the fallout of that is now he's got supernatural abilities or something going on with the back tattoos. We don't know about that quite just yet, but I think that's enough to get him just out of the C tier. I'm going to put him in the B tier right there. Now we've got Sandy Kim. We're going to move on. So Sandy Kim is part of the support, I guess, team for Alpha Core. So you've got, the main members of Alpha Core, that trio, and now including Stefania, who are the ones that actually go and deal with the accept crime. But Sandy Kim is one of the characters that support the Alpha Core in the Eagle's Nest, and I think she's going to go just behind Sanford Willard there. She's just, nothing, we don't know that much about her. We know that she doesn't have powers, so she's definitely a supporting character. Not that makes her a bad character, it just doesn't make her, it doesn't make her anything more than an average character, which is okay. You need those characters. You need the Sandy Kims, you need the Sanford Willards in any sort of good narrative. But a character that definitely is not average is Saoirse. So Saoirse is a character. Rippazine number 2 introduces her with Eric July writing and Kanan White doing the interior art. And people love Saoirse just like they love Salvage. And Saoirse now has her own ongoing series. And of course, this voluptuous, sexy, femme fatale redhead is going to absolutely terrorize the Forest Park, is absolutely going to terrorize all of our hearts as well. But I'm going to put her above Horseman. I think she is going to be a really interesting character. Of course, having that ongoing series is going to definitely make her more relevant to the audience, and of course, her character design is just chef's kiss. It's absolutely pure perfection. Right now, we're moving into Stefania. So, of course, Stefania was a former criminal introduced in Yaira number 1. She gets superpowers that come when Yanessa and Yantoni, or just before, Yanessa and Yantoni come to Earth to retrieve Yaira along with Magus Newmite. So she has powers that are similar to Yaira, and because of that, she gets recruited into the Alpha Core, although she's still trying to transition from being a hot-headed criminal, young adult, into being a mature crime-fighting person that can mature crime-fighting police officer that can report reliably to Brian Solari. So I'm going to put her at the top of the B tier. She's definitely going to be a really interesting character. Of course, having the power set of Yaira, one of the most powerful characters in the Rippaverse, is going to be a really interesting thing, but she does not have that control of her powers the same way that Yaira has. Of course, Yaira being centuries old, she's had so much more time than Stefania to forge and gain control of her powers. And considering the way Yaira number 1 ended, I don't think there's going to be a really good, there's not going to be a reconciliation between Stefania and Yaira anytime soon, where Stefania can be trained by Yaira on how to use her powers. So next we are going into this is Takiri. This is Takiri, and then there's Valadon. So Takiri and Valadon, are the members of Norfolka. So they're really a set as we know them. Their only comic book appearance so far has been at the very end of Isom #1. So we have the end of Isom's story, or the end of the first part of Isom's story in Isom #1, and then just after that, once he gets the suit from Citric Outro and he's going back into it, we get this little concert from Norfolka, and they are talking about stuff to come, and we get a little bit of insight into why Valadon and Takari are here on Earth, because there's something coming. We don't know much more about that. We know that their lyrics aren't just make-believe, right? And everybody, I'd say every fan of the Rippaverse just about loved Norfolka. It was always, when are we getting a Norfolka book? We need a Norfolka book. The Rippaveal was announced that we are getting Norfolka Glorious Death as a limited series with Eric July writing and Ronaldson Ferrara. I can never say his last name correctly, but he is doing the interior art for Norfolka Glorious Death, if I'm getting that subtitle correctly. So I'm going to rank them both, I think, at the very end. Actually, I'll put them here because they're gods. They're mythological beings, or at least they're beings that have mythological they're analogous to mythology, as in they have that kind of air about them. We don't know that much about them. We know that Valadon's based on Norse mythology. Takari is based on African mythology, and of course Valadon playing into Yaira's story, because she does have her origins on Earth traced back to ancient Scandinavia. So that's going to be a very interesting thing to see how they play, not only into how their story fits into the Rippaverse, but how it fits in with other characters as well. It's going to be very interesting to see, but we don't know that much about them yet, so I'm going to place them in the lower end of the A tier. So now we are going with Vassie Williams. I'm going to place her in C tier. She's Isom's nephew, Altona's daughter, and she definitely is a good kid. She's got a good head on her shoulders. In Isom #1, there's a scene between her and Avery. We can tell that she's a very intelligent child, but of course she's just that. She's a child. She's like, elementary school age. So C tier for her, because she's going to be very much so a supporting character. Like I said, that doesn't make her a bad character, but that doesn't mean that she's going to be having these big knockout roles. She's not going to be a super powerful person. She's going to be definitely more of a plot point in Isom's stories. But we are going with the last character, and of course Yaira is an anti-hero, but she's not quite a villain. I think she's got a moral code that's a bit higher than what a villain's is, and she's willing to do stuff that heroes aren't, so what makes her an anti-hero, right? And I think Yaira is very solidly going to be at that top of that A tier. Of course, she was introduced in Isom #1. She had a little bit of a fight with the Alpha Core, and that blended into being a fight with Isom, where she threw him onto a car from skyscraper height, and he survived. So it was a very, I would say, iconic opening scene for the Rippaverse. That's one of the scenes that has been depicted in the live-action trailer for Yaira. It's something that gets called back to a lot. The beginning of Yaira #1, her own book, starts off with her having just thrown Isom onto that car. So that encounter between Isom and Yaira has definitely been pretty defining for both of their characters. And of course, Yaira being this ancient alien woman with ice powers, and not only this extreme strength, this magnificent physique, being like 6'1", 215 pounds, if I'm getting her stats on her Dokemon card correctly. So she's this absolutely magnificent build physically. She's got these, the ice powers, the ability to fly, and of course she's got a wealth of knowledge, which is why she has that alter ego as Dr. Sally Rodell, being an archaeologist and a biologist, if I'm getting those fields of science correctly. She's very knowledgeable, so she's got the bronze and the brains, which makes her a very formidable character. And of course, she's got this stunning beauty about her, the long blonde hair, like I said, being like over 6 feet tall, and of course, having that icy cold, relentless way of going about pursuing whatever she wants, and the fact that she is an ancient alien woman, so she's been alive for centuries, like she saw her great grandchildren die. Very, very interesting character. Can't wait to see how she develops, not only in books, that she appears in, but of course her ongoing series with Yaira #2 being a book that should be fulfilling beginning of March, end of February. But that is my Rippaverse Heroes tier list. So if you guys like this, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave a comment below if you agree with my tier list. If you thought I got everything right, say so. If I got everything wrong, you're welcome to disagree with me. And if you're somewhere in between, that is all well and good. I got nothing else for you guys. Joker is out. Thank you for tuning in to the Braxcast. Be sure to like, comment, follow, and subscribe to keep up with the Rippaverse.